The following is a production of New Mexico State University.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That was impressive. Once again, good evening, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to your university, New Mexico State, and to the Domenici Public Conference. My name is Wadet Cruzado, and I'm honored to serve this wonderful university as its Executive Vice President and Provost. We want to... Thank you. We want to thank you for joining us at this very important event. In particular, please let's take a moment to recognize our illustrious honoree, Senator Pete Domenici. I would also like to recognize some of the distinguished guests in attendance, starting with our wonderful Board of Regents, our Chair, Blake Curtis, Regent Laura Caneff, Regent Javier Gonzalez, Regent Ike Pino, and Regent Chris Anaya. We also have a number of very important people in attendance, and I would like to recognize, I have seen one of our elected officials, Dolores Connor was here earlier. I don't know if Dolores is here. Welcome. To all of you, we are delighted to have you here. This event would not have been possible without the hard work of many people at NMSU and beyond, convened and led by the director of the Domenici Institute, Dean, Vice President, and former Governor Gary Carruthers. We thank them for their inspired and inspiring service. We're also grateful about the support that we have received from our sponsors. If you allow me, I would like to read out loud the names of those corporations, individuals, and institutions that have made this event possible. Stoller Research Corporation, New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck, Mountain View Regional Medical Center, P&M Services Company, the Fletcher Edwards Group, Merrill Lynch, Wells Fargo, Molson Corbin and Associates, New Mexico Tech University, John Cordova, William Kelleher, Manuel Lujan Jr., Van Gilbert and Architects, and our media sponsors, KFOX TV and Clear Channel. To all of them, thank you very much. So tonight it is a wonderful and special night at New Mexico State University. But let me suggest that first we will start with our dinner, and after meal I will come back and I will introduce our distinguished keynote speaker for the night. So enjoy your dinner. Thank you. I have a surprise for you. So I have just been informed that there has been a change in our plans. And since we are all known for being so flexible, I don't know that anyone here will object if we just present our fantastic and wonderful guest speaker at this moment. Is that okay with the audience? So once again, tonight, it is my pleasure and a distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker for the Domenici Public Conference. Janet Napolitano was sworn in on January 21st, 2009, as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security of the Obama administration. Secretary Janet Napolitano's story is symbolic of success. She was born in New York City and raised first in Pittsburgh and then in Albuquerque. In 1975, she went to California to attend Santa Clara University, where she won the prestigious Truman Scholarship for college juniors who show leadership potential and have an interest in government or public sector service. She graduated summa cum laude with a degree in political science. She then attended law school at the University of Virginia, graduating in 1983. Napolitano chose Arizona to build her career, clerking for U.S. Appeals Court Judge Mary Schroeder before taking a position with the Phoenix law firm Lewis and Roca, where she became partner in 1989. 4 years later, President Bill Clinton nominated her to serve as U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona. In that capacity, she helped the state respond to the Amtrak derailment near Phoenix. In 1998, voters elected her Attorney General of Arizona, the first woman to hold this position. In 2002, Napolitano was elected Arizona's 21st governor and America's first woman to succeed a woman as governor. She also became the first woman to chair the National Governors Association, in which she was instrumental in creating the Public Safety Task Force and the Homeland Security Advisors Council. In addition, she chaired the Western Governors Association. Napolitano was chosen by Time magazine as one of the top 5 governors in 2005. Her priorities included education, the economy, and the environment. She resigned midway through her second term as governor of Arizona to accept the appointment as U.S. Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. She is the 3rd Homeland Security Secretary and once again, the first woman to hold that post. Always courageous and exemplary, Napolitano survived breast cancer that was discovered in 1998. She's an avid basketball fan and regularly plays tennis. Whitewater rafting and hiking are some of Napolitano's hobbies. She has hiked in Arizona's Superstition Mountains and New Mexico's Sandia Mountains and has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and the Himalayas. The organs in Las Cruces are next. Still, she was telling me a little while ago that she is very proud about her first job, and that is when she worked in the Budget Committee with the Republican Senator Pete Domenici. Tonight, Secretary Napolitano has kindly accepted our invitation, and we'll be discussing the topic of Homeland Security and the U.S.-Mexico border. Needless to say, my friends, her background is extensive, and it summarizes her life. As U.S. Attorney, she helped lead the domestic terrorism investigation into the Oklahoma City bombing. As Arizona Attorney General, she helped write the law to break up human smuggling rings. As governor, she implemented one of the first state homeland security strategies in the nation, opened the first state counterterrorism center, and helped transform immigration enforcement. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, tonight marks a historic milestone for New Mexico State University. Please join me welcoming our distinguished guest speaker to her first visit to our institution, the Honorable Secretary Janet Napolitano.
Thank you. Wow. It is always great to return to New Mexico. Yeah. I mean, okay, so you got a lot of my bio. We actually moved here when I was 6 years old, so, I did elementary, junior high, and high school in Albuquerque. So it's always a pleasure to return home to New Mexico and to this conference with Senator Domenici, who was, as was said in the introduction, my first boss between college and law school. How many of the students here are government or we used to call it poli-sci? How many of the students here are government majors? Raise your hand. All right. Go for it. But I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, and the senator was kind enough to bring me back to Washington, D.C., allowed me to work with the Budget Committee, where I will tell you, if you get into government of any type, you always start with the numbers, and then you work from there. And that's where I learned that, and actually it was Senator Domenici who taught me how to round to $100 million, because that's the way they do things in Washington, D.C. A skill that I have maintained ever since. What I'm going to talk about tonight is what is happening with the Department of Homeland Security with respect to the border enforcement, and also where things are with respect to immigration reform, or comprehensive immigration reform at the legislative level. And I know you haven't eaten yet, so I'll keep my remarks somewhat brief so we have some time for questions before they start serving, if that's all right. But I think the topic that brings me here this evening is a little bit different than some of the topics you've been discussing during the day, energy, our energy future, but just as important, particularly for this area of the country, because the safety of the border security is not just about the border, it's really about the country as a whole. And we really stand at a historic moment because we have the opportunity, working with the government of Mexico, to make significant advancements in the safety and security of the border area, safety and security of Mexico itself, and the very courageous battle that is being waged there by President Calderon and his administration against the cartels. And those cartels affect then the homeland here as well, because they have fingers that reach throughout the United States. So as someone who has been working on border law enforcement issues for a number of years, certainly since the early 90s when I served as the United States Attorney, I just will share with you that this is a time that we just have not seen before and may not see again. So very, very important. And so That is why it's so very important that our two countries be working together. We have a very simple approach to this at the law enforcement level. One is drugs flow north and cash and guns go south. And if we can impede something in either direction, ultimately we can impact the cartels. And so with respect to interdiction efforts, we announced what we call the Southwest Border Initiative, the SBI, in March to increase resources and to refine the strategy that we were employing along the border. We doubled the number of agents that we assigned to what are called Border Enforcement Security Teams, or BEST teams. These are multi-agency. They include not just multi-federal agency, but also state, local law enforcement. We have BEST teams here in New Mexico now. We have them in all across the border now. We tripled the number of officers or agents assigned to do intelligence gathering and analysis. Why is this important? Because you know, stopping a car that's got some drugs in it is one thing. Being able to target stops because you have information about where drugs are flowing or guns or cash is another. And you're much more effective in the latter scenario than in the former. And so the ability to gather information or intelligence and to analyze it and to share it, so very key. We've increased our personnel in Mexico City by 50%. And why is that? Because of the close linkage we have now formed with the Calderon administration, working to go against these cartels. And these cartels, they're big. They've been there a long time. They're well entrenched. They have a lot of resources, and it is not going to be a sprint in this effort. It will be a marathon, but progress is being made, again, because of the historic partnership that we have. We have quadrupled the number of border liaison officers. We've doubled the number of violent criminal alien officers. And that's just to help at the border on the northbound stuff. But then we added to it a southbound strategy, and this was something that we've really never had before in the United States, and that is to interrupt or impede the flow of guns and cash. When I say cash, I mean bulk cash, you know, trunkloads full of cash that flow down south and support the cartels. So we've added mobile X-ray units that we can employ up and down the border. We transferred 100 Border Patrol agents to do southbound inspections. We deployed or have brought down to the border 15 more teams of canines that have been trained to sniff out guns and cash in vehicles. Let me pause for a moment there. One of the things I have learned is that trained canines are almost some of the best technology that we have in law enforcement, and we need to use more of them in many different ways because you can train a canine in almost any fashion, but we are using them extensively, and we will be using more of them. We put together groups, special teams, 25 agents a team, in addition to everything else I've said, that will do short duration duties along the border on southbound efforts. Short duration, they're going to be mobile. They're going to move because as we gather the intelligence, we can see where things are shifting. You know, the border's like a bedspread. You pull on one corner, another corner is going to move. So we need to move as well. And my hope and my plan is that not only will we move to where efforts are ongoing, but where efforts will be ongoing in the future. There's a great saying that Wayne Gretzky used to use, the great hockey player. He was once asked what made him so great. And he said, well, he thought he was a great hockey player because he would skate not just to where the puck was, but where the puck was going to be. And in some respect, that's how our law enforcement efforts need to operate as well. We're also using other kinds of technology. One relatively new device that we're now employing to great effect are license plate readers. These can be put on a law enforcement vehicle, and they will just click, and a car passes you going each way, and the license plate number clicks on the license plate reader. It immediately is read through a computer database, and very, very shortly thereafter, there's a little computer in the police car or deputy's car or agent's car that will ping and say, hey, this is a vehicle whose license number is a license of interest. And at that point, they can stop and see, well, what's going on? Is it a stolen car? Is this a fugitive? What have you? All of those efforts go together, and our goal, obviously, is to make this a safe and secure border area, not just for now, but permanently, and, again, institutionally, break up these cartels that have been plaguing us for far too long. For the first time, we are also inspecting every rail car that goes south into Mexico from the United States. Again, interrupt, impede, make more difficult, make more expensive. I'm not going to stand here tonight and say we are stopping every gun and every bit of cash that is going south, but I am standing here and telling you that we are having an effect on interrupting that traffic, just as we are having success on the traffic going north. Now, in addition to this, we have seen kind of a unique set of partnerships evolve. And let me give you a little historical perspective. Historically, in the 80s and in the 90s, issues involving the border, issues involving drug trafficking, immigration, were viewed as exclusively federal. And if you were a local police officer or you were a local prosecutor, you were basically told, stay away from that. That's a federal issue. The federal government's going to take care of it. Well, the plain fact of the matter is that during the 90s, those problems mutated in such a fashion and grew in such a fashion that the federal government simply didn't have enough resources located physically in this part of the country to deal with it. And so it's put a premium on developing state and local partnerships that really work. And so I think we are now in a position along this border to really use this border from a law enforcement perspective as the model for how you do that. We have formed a number of teams, state, local, federal. I already mentioned the best teams with you this evening. We took some federal grant funding called Operation Stone Garden. I don't know where they get these names from. I just write them down. But I'll tell you what it is. It's money that you can use and get to state and local law enforcement to help them buy equipment, but most importantly to help them pay for overtime. And if you've ever run a law enforcement organization and you're really upping your efforts, you know that overtime expenditure is always quite key. We also have reached historic agreements across the federal government because it used to be not only would the federal government say this is just federal, but you know, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, would say, no, this is DEA. And you, Customs, you don't have authority legally to do what DEA is doing. And they're same with ATF and the like. So you had all these stovepipes on the federal family built up from really decades and decades of legal interpretation. And so This year, the Attorney General and I, we both served as U.S. attorneys at the same time, both felt that those kind of old ways of thinking just won't do in this day and age when we have this historic opportunity. And so we have now signed agreements to meld together the legal authorities of Customs with DEA, of ICE with ATF. And now we're at the business of changing the culture of those law enforcement agencies so they recognize that they can indeed and should be working together, and then also working with their state and local partners. As I mentioned before, we're also working very, very closely with the country of Mexico. Let me talk a little bit about what is going on the Mexican side of the border. And I know the speaker tomorrow morning may be touching on some of the same things. But for example, Mexico is, for the first time in its history, establishing a customs service to do its own inspections at the border. They didn't have that before. It used to be, if you were going south, if you got through the U.S. side of the border, you were home free. All we saw were the taillights of the car going south into Mexico. That is changing. They are training law enforcement, vetted law enforcement, on investigative and intelligence gathering techniques. And by that training, and we're doing some of it, a lot of it actually, but by that training, that helps us develop that information sharing capacity. They have deployed federal police to the most vulnerable sections of the U.S.-Mexico border, and I think this audience will be familiar that they've even deployed the military to the state of Chihuahua, to Ciudad Juarez, where the violence is most extreme. But also I think they will be deploying military in other states of Mexico as well. We are working on this, there's a phrase I'm going to use now, real-time exchange of law enforcement information. And when I first heard that phrase, I said, well, what other time is there? But what it means is exchanging information in such a fashion, to being able to exchange it so quickly that law enforcement can act on it immediately, regardless of whether it's state, local, federal, regardless of whether it's on the Mexican side of the border or on the U.S. side of the border. That's real time. Real time means enforcement time. And that's what we're getting at. And that indeed is different. So all of that is ongoing. Now, I could give you a lot of numbers about all the seizures that are up, both in terms of drugs and cash and guns. But I think those numbers are not in and of themselves meaningful. Because what is the real meaning here is that we are weaving together both countries out of a recognition that the people who live in the border areas, be they living in the 6 states of northern Mexico or the 4 states of the U.S. along the border, that deserve a safe and secure environment, that this border is not just for stopping illegal drugs or immigration alike, but is an area where people live. Trade and commerce needs to be able to flow back and forth. Trade and commerce need to increase because that equates to jobs in these areas. And if we don't have the confidence that this border area is safe, secure, and stable, those kinds of good things that we've had historically in border areas will not occur. And so very, very important that we use this window. I'll tell you that the President is very involved in this, President Obama. I've been with him several times in meetings with President Calderon. They see this very, very similarly. The last meeting we had was in Guadalajara just about 7 weeks ago, where our mutual support was reiterated And so it, from the two leaders at the top, we spread out to get the work done. Let me not end tonight, or end my prepared remarks anyway, without discussing, however, the other major issue along the border that impacts the border, and that, of course, is the issue of illegal immigration. I think, again, we have seen an evolution. First of all, we've seen an evolution in numbers, or we have for a while. I saw this particularly as the governor of Arizona, where the Tucson sector represented over 50% of Border Patrol apprehensions for the entire nation. In 2005-06, that year, there were over 500,000 apprehensions in Arizona. That's a state of 6.3 million people, and there were 500,000 apprehensions. When those kind of numbers happen, people begin to feel like the border's out of control, that the rule of law is not being applied, and then they begin to lack confidence in what the government is and can do. So what we're about is restoring that confidence on the immigration side as well, by our increased enforcement, and I think kind of smart enforcement, taking the existing immigration law and refocusing it in ways where we think it will have the most impact. I'll give you an example. Worksite enforcement, instead of simply going in and picking up workers, really working with U.S. attorneys to developing cases against the employers who consistently, intentionally go into the illegal labor market to supply their own workforce, thereby impacting the legal labor market in their own area, but also creating that demand side for illegal immigration, which is primarily an economic migration, not a crime migration. It's primarily economic. So targeting more the employers. Refocusing what are called 287G agreements. When I said a few minutes ago that law enforcement along the border used to be just federal and we used to waive off the state and local law enforcement, well, that was really true in the immigration world because international boundaries are exclusively federal. But the public safety and other impacts of illegal immigration are felt at the state and local level. So you have this very difficult juxtaposition. Now, the bridge between those two things was a law that was passed under President Clinton. It's known as 287G, which are agreements, formal agreements that can be negotiated between the federal government and a state or a local law enforcement agency with respect to immigration. There aren't that many of those in the country. Most of them have worked very, very well. A few have been very, very controversial, and so they've become controversial in the political world. But here's the plain fact of it. The plain fact of it is that well-used, well-monitored, well-supervised, and well-targeted 287G agreements are an important tool in our enforcement arsenal. And so where we have targeted those agreements is in two areas. One are felony fugitives who are here illegally, and the second is working with jails and prison systems to begin and to train officers in those systems on how to process immigration paperwork so that as someone is completing their sentence, the process of removal from the United States has begun seamlessly. Previously to this, I'll tell you what was happening is people would serve sentence, they'd be released back out in the communities, and then the feds would have to go try to find them again. And that, of course, is not just wrong, makes no sense, and is a public safety issue. But this way we knit these things together. Also through something called secure communities, where we are installing now in jails and prisons across the country the computer databases, the immigration databases, to be used so that we can more effectively deal with illegal immigration, not as an immigration matter solely, but also looking at the public safety aspects of it as well. As we do that, we are also working on some other things that we need to improve. One is, of course, the whole issue of immigration and immigration detention, which I will share with you. Very, very troublesome. When I took over as secretary, we began looking into the conditions of detention on the illegal immigration side. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. If you are holding somebody in custody by virtue of the rule of law, then you have an obligation to make sure that it is safe and secure and healthy. And in some of our facilities, or facilities that we were contracting with, those standards, even those basic standards, were not being met. So I will be releasing in the near future a total kind of that's not the right word, overhaul would be the right word, but overhaul in the detention world where illegal immigration is concerned. Let me close with this, and that's where I started a little bit, which is to say the border law enforcement, cooperation with Mexico, all of those things are zooming along. The one thing that is going to take more time is going to be comprehensive immigration reform. But the President himself has said this is one of his top priorities. And once the Congress is done with health care, that this will be one of the top 3 priorities he has, which is really to really look at the underlying law, which from the immigration enforcement side needs to be strengthened in some areas, and which on the legal migration side needs to be adjusted so that we're really dealing with the workflow, the labor issues that have been involved. So we are working, and he's asked me to play point for the administration with the Senate and the House on legislation. Some of it is not new. You will have heard of parts of it before. They were parts of bills that have been considered before that didn't make it through. And then parts of it, like I said before, will be some novel concepts, particularly in the enforcement area where we really need to fill some gaps and give us some more enforcement tools. So our hope is that a bill will come out, and I'm not going to give you a timetable. I will tell you that Senator Schumer of New York is chairing the relevant subcommittee on the Senate side and has really taken this on in a leadership way. And so while the public is focused on health care and all of that debate is going on, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes getting ready for comprehensive immigration reform as well. And that any bill likely will include enforcement. It will include visa reform, streamlining the visa process, simplifying the visa process, and then it will deal as well with those already illegally in the country, and we'll have some components to it, such as a DREAM Act component that mirrors not just the reality that we have in the United States today, but mirrors the fact that we are a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants and a nation of opportunity. And we want our laws and this bill to reflect that. So I have, in a few moments, I think, given you an overview of where we stand with respect to the border security, immigration enforcement, and what it looks like legislatively. If you want to hear about some other elements of the Department of Homeland Security, like the Coast Guard or FEMA, you will have to stay for another speech. But I think with respect to Las Cruces, El Paso, New Mexico, these issues are issues we live with, you live with, every hour and every day. So they're the most important ones and the ones I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you, and thank you, Senator. me to take some questions? I'll take a few questions, and then dinner will be served. Governor.
Secretary, your department was kind of welded together from a variety of organizations, and the public perception is that hasn't worked really well. Would you speak to how well it's working in that it was put together rather quickly some years ago?
Well, it was put together right in the wake of 9/11. And it is 22 agencies. It's 218,000 employees. It's the third largest department in the federal government, next to Defense and Veterans Affairs. Some say it's unmanageable. I say, it's very manageable. It's not easy, but it really breaks down to four major missions. One is really our ongoing battle against terrorism and all the efforts there. I'll tell you, I spent 9/11 last Friday in New York City, and a lot of it, I spent about 3 hours at Ground Zero, and it gave me a renewed emphasis in this department, and the men and women who joined this department. A lot of them joined because of the attack on 9/11. But the battle against terrorism, it's securing the borders, land we've talked about, but also air and sea. It's enforcement of the immigration laws while we work for immigration reform, and it's preparation for and the ability to respond to any crisis, any emergency, whether caused by a terrorist attack or a hurricane, earthquake, or what have you. And when you kind of set it up in those four major mission areas, then you can begin now, we start melding this department into what we call one DHS, one Department of Homeland Security. And that process is well underway. Other questions? Yes?
Have you tried chihuahuas in your dog program?
I thought you were suggesting something to eat, and I was not that hungry. The answer is no, we have not. And if you have information that would suggest that they would be usable, please pass it on. Other questions over here in the purple sweater jacket. Yes, you.
Hi, my name is Anadia Lobos. I'm a government graduate student. You just mentioned talking about immigration reform and the DREAM Act. How possible or feasible do you think it will be to include that in immigration reform, and what do you think it means for the future of our nation?
I think if there is an immigration reform bill, and like I said, the President has made it one of his top priorities, it will have a DREAM Act component in it. And the DREAM Act, if it were run separately, has a lot of bipartisan support, Republican and Democrat. In fact, one of the lead sponsors is Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, who's a pretty conservative, known as a conservative Republican, but recognizes the value in the DREAM Act, recognizes that there's something wrong when a young person who may have been brought here as a 1 or 2 year old has grown up here, may not even speak the language of the country of origin, can't get a higher education because they were not born here, and not of their own volition were brought here. So I think it will be basically, at least start off anyway in the process, basically in the form that it's been introduced before. And what it will provide is access to higher education for that category of young people.
Thank you. Jackie Mitchell-Edwards from Merrill Lynch. We're at a unique place here, the border where we're 3 states, 2 countries. The focus on the border is huge. There are reports that have come out from the Border Governors Conference, COMEXI, the Pacific Group, all focused on the border. Some of them, most of them suggest cooperation not only between the 2 countries, but between agencies of the 2 countries. So what is your view with respect to creating specific or special entities which involve not only state and local, but federal across the country lines in terms of addressing some of the issues not only on the security front, but the economic development front and the immigration front.
Right. On the law enforcement side, that really is actually already occurring in the fashion you described. And really the new thing is the addition of the Mexican military, in addition to civilian law enforcement. As I said before, that I think may make a major difference over the coming months. With respect to all of the other efforts that need to go on the border, I mean, borders are places of trade, of commerce, of jobs. I suspect if Mexico is not New Mexico's #1 trading partner, I would be surprised. It certainly was Arizona's, and so we created an Arizona-Mexico commission that included all of those levels, and that included trade and tourism and the like. And that was a very, very strong and viable commission that met biannually with work done in between the meetings. And I think that model is now being repeated in some other places. I don't know about New Mexico, but certainly in California, the San Diego, Tijuana area, and also in Texas. So I think there are different models that can be used along the border that accomplish the same thing, which is that they link people together. And when you boil it down, we can have all the systems in the world we want, but if people don't know each other and they don't recognize, they're not used to each other, and know who's on the other end of that telephone when you call, it makes life a lot more difficult. So I think those kinds of things are happening.
Secretary, we have one more question here, and then Senator Domenici has some comments. Let's take one more question, and then Senator Domenici.
Yes, but I was Secretary. I'm Rene Casillas, and I'm wondering that without curtailing the voracious appetite for drugs in this country, is it possible that these interdictment policies that you've talked about will do any good about the drug problem?
No, you're exactly right, and that's why, for example, when we were meeting with the Calderon administration in Mexico City, we had the Gil Kolakowski, who's actually head of ONDCP, which is the drug czar's office, with us. And when we announced the Southwest Border Initiative, which we announced actually in Albuquerque, he announced it with me and with Attorney General Holder. You are exactly right. We have got to increase our efforts at demand reduction. And what does that mean? What it really means is making sure that particularly young people never try, much less get hooked on, be it marijuana, cocaine, what have you. We know that if we prevent a young person before the age of 18 from becoming addicted, the chances of becoming addicted as an adult go way, way down. We've kind of let that go, I think, retreat too much into the background. And we can't. And to me, it is an integral part of these efforts. Because as long as there are people who are willing to pay a lot of money for drugs, there will be some fashion of trying to get those drugs into the country. We can make it more difficult. We can break up the organized crime aspect of it. But those efforts will be ongoing. And so that demand side, yes, is part and parcel of our effort.
All right, one more question over here, then we'll turn to the Senator.
Okay.
Secretary Napolitano, Tanya Loya from University of Texas at El Paso, poli-sci major. We discussed about how we had collaborations with the government of Mexico, yet 3 weeks ago Mexico has legalized drugs and certain consumptions. We have those types of, this piece of legislation that came out. I'm a resident of Ciudad Juarez in El Paso, Texas, and we talk about the military, yet we see that.
Can somebody work on this mic? I'm having a hard time. Either don't use it or just talk. Okay. Yeah, I never said it was easy, and there's a real struggle in Mexico. But let me, if you're from Ciudad Juarez, I think that the struggle is most acute there, although not exclusively there. Yeah, it is not easy, and it's not neat, and it doesn't fit into an organizational box, and it's not quick. But it must be done. And I think one of the things that in Mexico is going to be very important is keeping up the public support for these efforts. Because if the public says, you know what, we can't do this, it's too hard, we're not seeing enough progress, it's not quick enough, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep up efforts at this level. So I hope that the public steels itself. These groups, these cartels, they've been around for decades. They're not going away in a year or 18 months. It's going to be a longer fight. But as that fight goes on, I think my message today is, and I hope you share with your colleagues and your friends, is that the United States is going to be there, and be there not just in words, but with manpower and with resources. Fair enough? Okay. Senator.
Madam Secretary, I had one question and one observation, and then I'll leave and let somebody have a nice time giving you a present.
Okay.
First,
that's a plan.
I heard the discussion about cartels, but I think some of us are looking at the situation and wondering whether any headway is being made in just straight issue of assassinations. It looks to me like there is so much confusion as to who's shooting who and who's on which army and whether the police department has strangers on it that kill the chief. What headway is being made in that regard? And while you're thinking of that, I want to say to you that over in the little town of Artesia, New Mexico, there's a big facility. It's called the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. All Border Patrol agents are trained there, and it's turned out to be a tremendous asset for New Mexico, and I think we're doing a good job. We have a little bit of isolation in terms of where we are, but even the airline services have acknowledged that this is terrific. They've added airlines and the like, and I wonder if you've heard of it, and if you haven't, will you look into it? And once you look into it, will you dispel from those that want to take it from us, take it somewhere else, the notion that we need anything any better than that? It's the best in the world.
Gotcha. With respect to FLETC in Artesia, it is a great facility. I do know about it. I know about it in part because when it was being created, the first idea was that that's where they would put the Coast Guard training. And that the Border Patrol would be being trained over near Charleston, South Carolina. And there was something wrong with that picture. So we got that switched around, but you're right. It is a world-class facility. And let me say without equivocation, for everybody out there, everybody on the news media, FLETC is a great facility, and I will fight for it and fight for it as a secretary. With respect to the assassination issue, Senator, you're right. And as I said to the prior speaker, the prior questioner, this is not easy, and it is very violent. And figuring out and sifting out who's on the right side and who's not, who's with which group and other group and the like is not easy. But one of the key things we are doing, it's under something called the Merida Initiative, which you may hear about. But getting trained and let me use this word, vetted law enforcement in Mexico, meaning background checks that are routine, that are done not just at the beginning, but throughout a person's service which is what we do with our federal agents. That is such an important concept for criminal justice moving forward there. And on the long term will be a great assist in being able to sort those things out. So one of the things we are really working on with Mexico, not just at the federal level, but at the state level as well, is building into future plans vetted law enforcement.
Madam Secretary, what a joy to have you here tonight. Thank you for your wonderful message. We have learned a lot. If you're ever serious about considering Chihuahua dogs, let me know. I have two at home. Their names are Taco and Salsa, and we might solve more than one problem if I recruit them. On behalf of New Mexico State University and the Domenici Public Conference, we just want to say thank you for taking from your very busy calendar to join us tonight. And at this moment, I would like to present you with a token of our appreciation. There's a very talented local artist. Her name is Virginia Romero. And Virginia has created this wonderful tile to commemorate the Domenici Public Policy Conference. And at this moment, I would like to present it to Secretary Napolitano.
Oh, that's great. That's gorgeous. That's really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to thank all of you for being here, and now join us for dinner. I think that dinner is ready. Thanks a lot.
The preceding was a production of New Mexico State University. The views and opinions in this program are those of the author and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the NMSU Board of Regents.